On April 11, 2021, during a thunderstorm, one of the most audacious thefts in recent history went down at Miami International Airport. A lowly janitor named Luis Herrera made off with 2 duffel bags stuffed full of cartel cash, disappearing into thin air and leaving behind no trace of his whereabouts. The security footage shows him casually strolling out of the airport with the bags over his shoulder, like it's just another day. This is what happened to the airport janitor who stole $4 million and vanished. There are plenty of jobs that are considered to be dead-end positions, but few of them carry with them the kind of stigma that comes with being an airport janitor. Generally speaking, society tends to look down upon people who work in cleaning or maintenance positions, often assuming that they don't require much skill or intelligence to do the job. However, this couldn't be further from the truth. Janitors need to be resourceful and adept at problem solving, and perhaps no one exemplified these qualities better than Luis Herrera. In the years leading up to the audacious theft, Luis had worked as a janitor at the airport for almost 2 decades. He had become intimately familiar with the ins and outs of the building and its security routines. During that time, he made sure not to draw attention to himself and kept his nose clean. He wasn't exactly the model employee, but he never got into trouble either. It was clear to everyone that he was a man of few words and kept to himself, but that didn't make him any less observant. The fact that he'd been at the airport for so long meant that he knew every nook and cranny of the place, like the back of his hand. For example, he knew exactly where to hide when the cleaning staff came in at night to keep his break times from overlapping with theirs. He also knew how the security guards patrolled the area, giving him enough time to do whatever he needed to do. Even though he was only a janitor, there was nobody at the airport who knew it better than him. So when he set his sights on pulling off the heist of a lifetime, there was no place better suited for it than the busy Miami International Airport. But how did he come up with such a risky plan? Well, everything started with a series of strange withdrawals from his bank account. On March, Luis began withdrawing large sums of cash from his bank account, taking out $1,000 here and $3,000 there. The weird thing is that he didn't really have any money in his account. To say that he was broke would be a horrific understatement. But somehow he managed to withdraw thousands of dollars over several different days. When the bank tellers asked him why he needed so much cash, he gave them some cockamamie story about having a lot of expenses coming up. Of course, the tellers weren't buying it, but since there was no suspicious activity attached to the account, they let him take out as much as he wanted. They probably thought it was a rich guy trying to avoid using his credit card. Little did they know he was getting ready to rob a drug cartel. All told, Luis pulled out around $38,000 over the course of a week. He emptied his entire life savings account to get it done, even though the money technically belonged to his wife. Of course, she had no idea he was doing this. By withdrawing smaller amounts of cash each day, Luis avoided setting off any fraud alerts and managed to get away with it. But even so, the total amount he took out was way beyond anything he could have saved up on his own. So where did the money come from? Well, that's the thing. Luis actually stole it all from the airport. How he managed to do that for so long without anyone noticing is still a mystery. Perhaps he was stealing little by little over a long period of time. Or maybe he had only recently started stealing. Whatever the case may be, he certainly wasn't making that kind of money on his janitor's salary. Of course, he would be able to make those massive withdrawals if he had taken the time to plan it out. That means he must have been plotting this heist for a while. Maybe he'd been casing the joint for months or even years before he decided to pull the trigger. No matter what his motives were, Luis was now loaded with stolen cash, and it was time to put his plan into action. But first, he had to get through his shift on the day of the heist. At the time, Luis was working the night shift, so he clocked in at 6 p.m. As always, he went straight to the cargo area and got to work. His job was simple, basically to keep the place clean and tidy. But he also had another secret responsibility, stealing as much cash as possible. It's unclear how long he'd been doing this for, but we do know that he was quite good at it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have amassed nearly $40,000 in stolen funds. When he showed up for work that day, he knew that he was about to execute the riskiest plan of his life. With the bags of cartel cash hidden somewhere on his person, Luis went about his duties as usual. All the while, the storm raged outside, making it nearly impossible to see through the security cameras. No one could make out what he was doing because of the bad weather, which worked out perfectly for him. As soon as his shift ended at midnight, Luis clocked out and headed to the baggage area. There were 2 duffel bags waiting for him, both of them locked up tight. With shaking hands, he opened the locks and unzipped the bags. Inside were bundles of cash, hundreds of thousands of dollars stuffed into plastic bags. We don't know exactly how much was inside, but reports say it was somewhere between $3 and $4 million. He slung the bags over his shoulder and walked calmly out of the airport. Security footage shows him blending in with the crowd of people waiting to pick up arriving passengers. And that was the last anyone ever saw of him. The bags, along with all of the money inside, were gone. Authorities didn't realize what had happened until a few hours later when the cargo workers arrived to find the 2 empty duffel bags. As word spread about the missing money, a manhunt was launched, but it was too late. Luis had vanished, and he was never seen again. As it turned out, Luis had called in sick for the next day, and nobody thought anything of it. But what they didn't know was that he'd already left town and would be staying out of state for the foreseeable future. It seemed like he'd completely evaporated into thin air. To make matters worse, there were no signs of forced entry or any other signs of a struggle. It looked like whoever had stolen the money had simply walked right in and taken it. Because of this, the police were stumped. They had no leads and no suspects. All they had was a grainy image of a man walking away from the airport with 2 duffel bags slung over his shoulder. For the next 3 years, the police pursued every lead they could think of, but none of them panned out. They even offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person responsible. But even that didn't turn up anything. What makes the case even more bizarre is that nobody claimed responsibility for the theft. The authorities believe that it was an inside job, but they've never been able to prove it. All they have is a handful of circumstantial evidence and a mountain of speculation. To this day, nobody knows what happened to the missing money or where Luis Herrera is hiding. Some say he used the cash to start a new life somewhere far away. Others say he invested it in crypto, and now he's a millionaire. But that's just speculation. We may never know what truly happened to the airport janitor who stole $4 million and vanished. But one thing is for sure, he's got quite the story to tell if he ever decides to come forward. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.